Hello and welcome to Early Childhood Ireland's podcast. Our podcast features interviews and discussions on all issues relating to quality early learning and care, with a range of speakers who are leaders in the areas that matter to Early Childhood Ireland members. I'm Maura Corbett and I work with Early Childhood Ireland. In this episode, I'm delighted to be chatting with Cathy, Steenson and Breifní Cusack. Cathy is the Early Years Manager in Carr's Child and Family Services, and she's worked in the community sector of early years for the last 20 years. She returned to formal education in 2012 and received a BA in Early Childhood Teaching and Learning from Maynooth University. And in 2021, she dipped her toe in the water some more and graduated from TU Dublin with an MA in Child, Family and Community Studies, and her dissertation focused on how children aged 3 to 5 living in homeless accommodation are involved in the decisions which affect their everyday lives. Breifní previously has a BA in Business Administration, and she worked in the corporate world for many years before coming to Carr's. But she always had an interest in early childhood development, so she decided to retrain, and she qualified in childcare and then carried on and did certification in play therapy. But she also has an interest in food and cookery, so she combined all of those and subsequently qualified in culinary skills. So all these interests brought her to Carr's. She's working in the setting for 4 years. And while she's there, she's developed a nutrition program which covers growing food, harvesting food, menu planning, supporting children to recognize food and cookery. So following on from our last episode with Professor Laura Lundy and Anne O'Donnell about the National Strategy on Children and Young People's Participation in Decision Making, I suppose we wanted to look at how this can happen in practice, how it can happen every day, giving children real opportunities to participate in their settings. So I'm really looking forward to chatting with Cathy and Breifní, and you're both really welcome.
Thank you, Maura. Thank you. Hi, Maura, and thank you to Early Childhood Ireland for giving us this space to highlight something we're really proud of that we do every day in practice in our service, and we're glad to have the opportunity to share it with everybody else.
Yeah, and it's great to hear from practice. So Cathy, could you tell me a bit about yourself and your setting? Well, I suppose your setting, we'll go on to talk about your research in a second.
Yeah, hi. As Maura said, my name is Cathy Steenson. I'm the Early Years Manager in Carr's Child and Family Service. Our service is a TUSLA-funded service, and we offer support to vulnerable families and children, many of whom are living in homeless accommodation.
And so, Cathy, how many children do you have? Do they come for full days, part days?
We have 25 children at most, and they age between, we could have babies from like a week old until they go to school, till they're ready to go to school at 5. So we're a bit different in that we can have babies straight from hospital because of the nature of our service. There's 3 different parts to our service. There's the early years part, there's supportive housing part, where families live for 18 months with the help of family support. We also have an assessment unit where families are sent, usually court-directed, or for a family assessment for 12 weeks. So we'd have a combination of all those children, or else just children that have been referred, usually by the social workers or the public health nurse.
So a huge range of family support services going on in addition to the kind of more regular early years. And so it's clear that it's from that background that your research question for your master's grew. Can you tell us about your master's? What drew you to that that question, the topic of children's participation? What did you find out? I'm dying to hear about that.
Okay. So we all know that the foundation for virtually every aspect of human development is laid in early childhood. What happens in early childhood has lifelong effects on many aspects of health and well-being. My research aimed to explore if giving young children a voice in decisions that affect their daily lives not only benefits them as they grow and learn in their early years, but that it will remain as a resilient factor throughout their lives. Latest Irish studies show that in Ireland, children are the fastest growing group living in emergency and temporary accommodation. So this number supports the necessity to include these children in decisions which affect their daily lives. My research focused on the participation of young children aged between 3 and 5 years of age and who are currently living in homeless accommodation. This then gave me a deeper understanding of how parents and professionals who have contact with these children view including them in decisions that affect their daily lives. For children living in homeless accommodation, their home environment may not always feel like a safe space. The participants of my research highlighted that a lack of space for children living in homeless accommodation was a huge concern. This affirmed the importance of the space provided in the early years setting. The early years environment can provide a safe physical space in which children can express themselves. Children need to feel this safety and feel secure before any learning can take place. Involving children in decision making will help them to feel a sense of security and belonging. To engage young children in having a voice, the language we use must be kept simple. For this, the Lundy model, 2007 model of child participation, offers a child-friendly framework to promote participation. Lundy argues that children's right to a voice must be facilitated by child-friendly information, time to understand the issues that affect them, and fun activities to elicit their views. It is not enough to listen to children's voices. Adults need to respond and show they have heard the child's voice. Implementing this model into practice demonstrates how including children in this process is not complicated and can be a simple everyday practice, putting children's rights at the centre. Breifní will now give a lovely example of how child participation is promoted in our setting through the 4 elements of the Lundy model. Space, children, which states that children must be given safe, inclusive opportunity to inform and express their view. A voice, where children must be facilitated to form their view. An audience, the audience must be listened to and influenced. The view must be acted on as an appropriate. So Breifní will go through her steps that we use to provide all these elements of the model to get the end results.
Yeah, that was a great overview, Cathy, and I'm glad you simplified it, that you mentioned it isn't, once you get into the habit of doing it, it's not needn't be complicated. So thanks for that overview. And yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing from you too, Breifní, because in Cathy's blog for Scéalta Early Childhood Ireland's blog, she mentioned the lovely example and the lovely simple everyday example of one of the ways that you do it in Carr. So yeah, looking forward to hearing this.
Okay, Moira. So essentially, as you said, my journey here to Carr's and to being a cog in this child participation and development arena was from my interest in children, in their development, their early childhood development, and also in particular with those who have experienced some form of the many guises of early childhood trauma. But that in combination with my own personal interest and hobby, really, that is food, and it's central to all of our lives. And of course, it's one of the most basic things that's central to a child's early childhood development. So in joining Carr's and with the abundant encouragement and support from Cathy and also from the rest of my colleagues here, an idea that began as quite a simple routine has kind of developed into a more comprehensive program, and it involves 4 main elements. Food recognition, which of course is the raw ingredients and flavors that are involved in the meals that we make and eat. Our weekly menu choice, with Mr. Broccoli Head and our food book, which I'll explain now in just a moment. Our Garden to Fork, which is essentially planting, growing, harvesting, cooking, and eating. And then finally, our cooking and baking together. And through these 4 elements, the children become familiar with all the aspects of food, from selection to preparation to consumption. But most importantly for us here, it's the key to our program, and that is it's all developed with the children's participation. They have an active role with me and are directly involved in the decision-making process on a very primary event that affects their daily lives, the right to a nutritious meal. So as a result, all aspects of food and nutrition with the children are made fun and exciting for them because they are intrinsically involved in the process throughout. By being given an opportunity to be involved in the decision making, which I'm going to explain to you now with their menu selection, and being able to express their opinions and be listened to, they develop a sense of belonging. And it's a sense of importance that what they say and what they feel matters and has a concrete, tangible result in the form of fresh, homemade, nutritious meals that they select for our menu each week and that they then eat. Just before I describe how we go about that with Mr. Broccoli Head and our food book, I thought I might just mention that the foods are all fresh, homemade, nothing is prepackaged, nothing is processed. And so what's vital with that is encouraging the children to recognize fresh ingredients and the journey of those fresh ingredients to the final meal that they then enjoy. For a great many young children, fresh natural ingredients can be something that is very unfamiliar to them. And what we try to promote here is that they actually are involved in and have an opportunity to discover, recognize raw ingredients and associate them with the flavors that they then enjoy to eat. Over the past 4 years, I've devised some different healthy, nutritious ways of making foods that are their favorites, that they do ordinarily recognize and are familiar with, but in a more nutritious and health-packed way. So just as one example, our pesto pasta here, which is something that they adore, is, while familiar looking, it's green, it's tasty, it smells good to eat, is in fact not your typical pesto pasta. It's fresh spinach, fresh broccoli, fresh garlic, fresh olive oil, all pureed together into something that resembles very closely what they would typically recognize as pesto pasta, but that in actual fact, it's just packed with nutrition and health. And in the same way, with our chicken curry as an example, it looks orange, it smells like your typical curry takeaway, but in actual fact, it's all fresh, raw ingredients, sweet potato, carrots, onions, coriander, coconut milk, and they recognize the smell, they recognize the look, but that the food itself is actually packed with nutrition. And so what this has to do with, and why I'm describing that to you first, is that over these years, I've actually photographed and correlated, laminated these images of the raw ingredient, the journey of that raw ingredient to becoming the meal that they then choose and enjoy. And I've taken photographs of absolutely everything and laminated it all, and we've created a what we call our food book, and it's with that we actually choose our menus every week. And so not only are they seeing the image of the food that they enjoy, but they're also being exposed to the ingredients that they then can recognize as being part of the meal that they love. So every Friday, I join with the children, and we either sit in the classroom on the floor together or out in the garden with our food book, and also with our Mr. Broccoli head. The children take it in turns, going through the book, choosing the meal that they would like to have for the following week, and telling Mr. Broccoli head what they have selected. So this is twofold. Mr. Broccoli head is actually, he has two jobs. The first one is that in seeing him arrive on a Friday, they recognize that it's now time for us to sit down and make some decisions. So they almost instinctively recognize that it's time for making choices. It's their time to participate. The second use of Mr. Broccoli is, as you can imagine, with 3, 4, 5-year-olds, patience and turn taking can be extremely challenging. And with Mr. Broccoli head, they each take it in turns to hold him, to speak to him in his ear, to tell him what they've chosen, and to show him in the book what they've chosen for the following week. We then,
sorry, Bethany, can I just ask what size of a group?
Sure.
What size of a group of children would this be?
There's usually about 10, but
okay.
there can be up to 15 children, but usually about 10. Okay. And so when we've chosen, and everybody's had an opportunity to participate, and everybody's had an opportunity to give their choice, Mr. Broccoli then rereads all of their choices, and we clap and cheer at each one of the children's choices. And this is actually vital. It's actually the real reason for the for us doing this. It's to give them very much needed positive reinforcement that they have made a choice, they have participated, we have listened, and there is a tangible result to that happening. And although it's simplistic in its form, actually it's key to what they're learning with child participation in that environment. Then just expanding on that, we actually have a very simple vegetable and fruit patch, which the children have been directly involved in planting, growing, and then finally, excitingly, harvesting. And the experience of children actually digging in the soil and finding the treasures underneath and pulling them out with their own hands, and then associating that with what they then eat later is it's pretty magical, because there's a real sense of wonder, and the enjoyment is incredible, not just for them, but for ourselves, the adults also. And so then extended on that, they then are part of the cleaning process, the preparation process, and then of course finally eating. Now that's a special occasion. Obviously, it's the time of the year when you actually can harvest. That doesn't happen every Friday, but it is part of the program that we're developing here. So we have our let's call it garden to fork, in the sense that it's the planting through to the eating. We have our menu selection, which is very child-centered and is with their child participation being vital, they see the tangible result of that. And so the girls have actually expanded on that in the classroom, have created a Monday to Friday menu board. They have made copies of the laminated images of the food from our food book. And they've also laminated photos of the children, so that after we've made our choices for the following week, each of the children that week place their image with the food that they have chosen on the day that it's going to be eaten. And so it's a very direct correlation between their choice making, their decision making, and being a central part of that, and seeing the tangible, visible result of that. And so it's kind of really fleshed out the whole concept of child participation in that. And then, of course, we have the cooking and baking. And we cook and bake together, usually every 2 months or so. The children don their aprons and their chef hats, and we actually cook or bake something special together. That in itself is such a great child participation activity related to food, in the sense that it uses all of those vital development skills of physical, emotional, cognitive, communicative. All of that is involved in cooking and baking together. And also it's something that brings out and encourages their social interaction with each other in a really fun way that they enjoy. And again, there's the tangible result, the visible result, that after they've completed it and when it's been baked or cooked, they then eat it. So essentially, those are the 4 aspects of what we cover here. It's the food recognition of the raw ingredients and the flavors. It's the weekly menu with Mr. Broccoli Head and our food book, which is essential. It's the garden to fork, the planting, growing and eating. And then it's the cooking and baking with me. So they're involved in all 4 aspects of that. And
all 4 steps.
Yes, and they can see the result.
I think that idea of showing the children, giving them an appreciation of the step before the supermarket, that often children who live in cities and towns don't realize. And as somebody who lives on a farm myself, I've shown my friends' children around maybe, and they're stunned to realize that milk comes from a cow rather than a carton kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I think that's really great. I also love the idea of Mr. Broccoli, that I think broccoli can be a much maligned vegetable as a broccoli lover myself.
Absolutely.
So giving children a sense that broccoli is nice is a good one. It's good. I thank you both so much for that really comprehensive take on the importance of supporting children's participation and giving us, really tangible ways in which that can be done. I know not every setting might have the resources to be able to put in place a program with all the 4 steps, but involving the children in cooking and baking and understanding that there are steps before food comes into the home or the setting, involving children in menu planning. There's so many simple ways, like Cathy said there, that children can be encouraged, and that gives them I think a great sense that they can be involved and participate and express an opinion in other areas of their lives when they're given the tools and the recognition that they have a voice and that they're visible and that matters. And I think it was Cathy mentioned that the link that has to well-being, so which is a really important part of developing resilience. So I think you've both given us loads to think about and talk about there, and thank you both very, very much for that. And thank you for listening to Early Childhood Ireland's podcast. And if you've enjoyed the podcast, please tell your friends and colleagues, and we hope you'll join us the next time.